Hi, welcome back to Two Women Left Unsupervised. We are again alone and unsupervised, and we are going to talk about some creepy shit today. Um, Namely, just weird stuff that we've experienced in our travels and strange occurrences.
Even some
Susie, do you
hauntings.
want to tell me about your mother's house?
The mother's house. So to get the ball rolling, growing up, I lived on my entire family moved up to this non-working farm. It was about 108 acres of unworked farmland and orchards and all kinds of craziness and a hotel. So we had the hotel restaurant business, which is still in my family, and it was kind of a resort for a while there. Like the train would come into this town in upstate New York, and the guy who originally owned the place would go in a horse-drawn buggy and pick people up from the train station and bring them back to the hotel, and then they would stay there for the week or whatever.
Cool.
And there was two lakes and stuff like that. One of the lakes was man-made, and so there was all these buildings. There was a hotel, and the hotel in and of itself was insane because they built onto it, and so it had all these weird little spaces and stuff, and chimneys that went nowhere and everything. It was almost like the Winchester Mansion, and because it was people that really had no business building things that were just I'm gonna build a thing. So we'd have rooms that had windows but no doors. Yeah, walled off rooms with windows, no doors. And why are they there? I don't know. But so yeah, one of the things I actually wrote about was the watershed, which was on the property. And that place was creepy as hell. So if you want to read that story, it's pretty much the watershed.
I'll put it down below.
So yeah, there was that, there was the milk house, there was the barn, there was the annex, there was the lake house, and there was the mother's house. And so we had started off living in the annex, and then we ended up moving over to the mother's house after the annex had caught fire. So while living in the mother's house, I was a kid, and I woke up one night because the bedroom, my siblings and I all slept in the same bedroom, and my parents were over in another bedroom area. They'd kind of sectioned off one spot so we could all be on the same floor. In the wintertime in upstate Pennsylvania, near upstate New York, it gets very cold in the winter, and it was an old house. It was over 100 years old. So we put the plastic on the windows and all that fun stuff. Well, we had the entire upstairs we would just close off in the wintertime so we didn't waste the heat, because we had an oil. What's that?
How old were you? I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just
I was probably 8, I would say. And so yeah, so that we keep the upper level of the house closed off, so that way we would just heat the downstairs because it would burn less oil. And we had a fuel oil burner in the basement, and it was one of the octopus ones. Yeah, so more creepy right there. So there was all these old antiques and stuff left over from the guy who had built the place. And so we had this giant octopus oil burner that looked like hell itself when, sorry, I forgot to mute that. So yeah, so we had this giant oil burner and everything. So we would close off the upstairs. And there was this plywood panel in the kitchen that would go over the doorway going up to the stairs. And so one night I woke up, our bedroom was lit up, and that's what woke me up. And it was really either really late or really early, but everybody was asleep. And I got up, and there was these two balls of light in the middle of the room, and one was red and one was blue. And they went out into the living room, and I climbed down out of the bunk bed and I followed them. And they went through the living room, through the kitchen, and then went behind the plywood panel that we kept blocking off the staircase. And so I moved the plywood panel and I followed these things, and they went up the stairs. And then the mother's house had been used as a guest house when the hotel was in business, way back in the day. So all the rooms had numbers on the doors. and it had like the shared bathroom, and then each room had sinks in it, like little wash areas with medicine cabinets. And the one door all the way at the end of the hall, we always kept locked. I don't know why. Um, so these balls of light like went through that door, and I was like, well, I can't get to them now. But it was the weirdest thing because that room was always locked, and we always just used it as like a guest room.
Did it like feel like they were trying to lead you there, or you just were curious, or?
I was curious. I didn't get any bad vibes off of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Well, obviously not. You followed them.
yeah.
Did any of your siblings ever see anything similar?
My sister, she said she saw something like in the closet. It was kind of like a shadow of some sort. But honestly, like, the place was so haunted that it it would have been weird not to have experienced anything.
Right.
The hotel was really haunted. The mother's house was haunted. The barn was haunted. I don't know about the lake house because we always just rented that out. But yeah, I mean the whole property just had like a really wild energy that it's like every once in a while I just get like crazy homesick for that place because it was amazing. I mean, it was just paradise of it was like the Hardy Boys meet Nancy Drew and go like hang out, and like there's the mystery of the old clock in an entire property. But yeah, we used to go swimming in the lake and stuff like that. Apparently the it was said that the guy, somebody having to do with like Cream of Wheat or Uncle Ben's or something, was the cook at the hotel, and he was like this world famous guy, and he like disappeared one day, and that's where he ended up, was at this hotel. And at one point, like, people died in the lake and stuff like that, and I think his kid was one of the ones who drowned in the lake. And yeah, so I can't verify any of this, unfortunately. I've done all the Googles and I can't find any info.
I was just picturing swimming in that lake. I would always be afraid that hands were going to grab me and pull me down. So that
That
was like half of the fun of it.
that is uh, so it used to have a dock. It used to have a couple of docks. There was a wooden dock, and then there was a metal dock, and then at one point there was like this big slide that went into it. And then somewhere along the line, I don't know when, I don't know how, don't know any of it. The slide fell over, so we were never allowed to go to that area. And then eventually the docks came down, the metal dock came down and just got packed there, like stacked up. And so we had just like a boat ramp at that point. And so we'd go and we'd swim. And, I used to swim, like, before I was terrified of water. And so I just remember, like, the one time I went to go swim and I had gotten pushed out further than the edge of the concrete. So I was in over my head. And I had enough air to get back from where I knew to go. And I swear I felt something grab my foot. So after that, I never went in the lake again. I never went past that concrete abutment where the dock ended.
Is that what made you afraid of water?
Yeah,
I would do it.
I love water. I do. I love being next to water. I love being in shallow water, but I don't go in over my head anymore. Ever since then. And I was young when that happened. I came out like coughing and spluttering.
Yikes.
Yeah. So it was a really cool property though. I do miss living there. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Yeah, I miss we had this place growing up in Wyoming when my sister and I were little. Um I couldn't have, it must have been from the time I was like 7 or 8 until I was 10 or 11. And we had horses there, and we had, the chickens and the geese and the ducks, and, pick an animal. We had goats, we had everything. But my sister and she had this pony, and I had my horse, and we would just like get on them and leave and be gone. Like, we'd just like, we're going out riding. Okay, be back by dark. Parents didn't know where we were. Like, it was 80s. It was, you could just go. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming.
Yeah.
We literally lived on a place. It was called Monkey Mountain.
Nice.
Yeah, and we could actually ride our horses to the little general store there and buy like beer and cigarettes for our parents at like 9 years old. Yeah, because our parents knew the storekeepers and whatever.
Yep.
Yep.
That's awesome.
It was one of those. The roads were dirt, and they bussed us into town to go to school. But yeah, so there was this one house. My sister and I were terrified of this house. Like, I don't know, you would start to feel like it was on about, I don't know, 10 acres, but you could see the house from the road because you could see almost all the houses from the road. And it just, this foreboding would hit you about like 2 houses down. Remember, these are big properties, 5 to 10 acres each. 2 houses down, you'd start to feel kind of, and then you'd get by the house, and it was always like something wanted to drag you in. So my sister and I used to do this thing where we would see who could get the furthest down the driveway without getting scared and turning around.
Nice.
And yeah, I've always been this way. And there was definitely something there because the horses used to get scared too. And I swear there were times like nobody lived in it, the house was abandoned, and you could see like people in the house. Yeah.
Squatters?
Most often people would see a woman, but then they also would see a little girl.
Ooh.
Yeah. Both of them wearing like white dresses. Nobody ever, like, none of my friends ever got close enough to see what they really were wearing. But it was weird because it was like none of the adults believed us that this place was haunted. They were just like, no, the house that's been for sale, it's not abandoned, there's no ghosts. But my mom, who didn't believe us, like, forbid my sister and I, you guys are not to go near it. You ride by on the other side of the road, you just stay away from it.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's when the driveway game started, of course. Of course.
Well,
And so we stopped playing it though when so I was about 10, so my sister must have been about 6. She was little. And I was responsible for her at 10 for the day, just in the wild. We were feral.
yeah,
So,
exactly. 8 years old watching my 4-year-old sister.
yeah, we were absolutely feral.
And not doing a good job of it.
Yeah. We would, like, the places we would go, oh my God. But we stopped playing the game when she rode down and came back crying. And I was just like, you know what? Nope, no more. Can't do this to her anymore. And then I went down one more time to like make her not feel so bad. And then I wanted to cry. Like, it was just awful, awful presence. Like, your hair, my hair standing up on the back of my neck, even thinking.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, something wanted to hurt you in that house.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can like ask my sister to this day, and I'm sure she still remembers it.
That's creepy.
Mm-hmm. But my mom must have felt something from it too, because she was like, nope, you guys stay away from it. I forbid you to go near there. My mom didn't tell us to stay away from much of anything. She just let us go out and be us.
Yeah,
But
we had
not
2 lakes that we could play in
mm,
with no lifeguard on duty.
yeah, feral children too.
Oh, very feral children. The only place we were not allowed to go was the side of the barn that had gotten struck by lightning
Mm-hmm.
back before we owned the place, because the timbers were all burnt out. So we weren't allowed to walk in that side of the barn. Um, and we were not allowed to go into the side of the milk house that was falling
Mm-hmm.
in. We could go in the side where they had stored the milk. We couldn't go into the production side of it because the roof was literally caving in. You couldn't,
Wow.
like, my parents put a padlock on the door and wouldn't let us in there. We were also not allowed into the watershed without an adult, because there was a cistern that if you fell in, you weren't getting back out.
So tell me, like, obviously something happened with you in that watershed in that cistern for you to write the story you wrote.
It was terrifying. I mean,
Did
it was this like ramshackle little building, and it, like, in my kid's mind, I didn't know that when buildings start to fall down, the frames of windows pop and stuff like that, so windows break.
Mhm.
And the window glass was broken out, so it looked like something had tried to come out of the watershed. um,
Right.
and so, here you've got this like ramshackle little building, you've got this weird jaggedy cistern popping up out of the ground.
Mhm.
And I remember the one time I went in there with my dad, and the ceiling was falling in, and I I'm not sure if my dad had put planks across or if the ceiling had just fallen in and blocked it, but it was like planks over the cistern. And the cistern itself, the water was like this weird murky white. And I remember seeing like something. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just something moldy or what, or if like an animal had fallen in, but it was in there. And there was like birds and stuff that were just like lying dead in there. And so a cat probably had
Wow.
used it as like its lair.
Mhm.
So there was like bits and pieces of animals in there. But to a kid who doesn't know that, because at that point we hadn't, the only pet we'd had were like chickens and ducks and a dog, and they didn't typically bring stuff home. So I didn't understand that this is what cats do. They go out, they hunt, they get their stuff, and they bring it back to their lair. Um, so to me, it just looked like all these animals had like fallen in there and died.
Or like something had dragged them in there and murdered.
Yeah, so it looked almost like the watershed itself had like eaten them and just like spit out their bones and spit out their bodies.
Mhm.
Not necessarily it needed to eat the body, it just needed to like suck out the soul. So yeah. So to my child's imagination, this has just been brewing. But yeah, I mean, it was creepy. And I was talking to my dad about it, because I was like, do you remember the watershed? And he's like, oh my god, I haven't thought about the watershed in years. And so he was saying like they looked for the irrigation hookup like down in the field, and they couldn't find it. It was overgrown or covered over, or maybe it had just gotten removed. So he was just like, yeah, so it was just this watershed sitting there with a cistern on it. And I was like, I wonder whatever happened to it. So I like Google Earthed it, because I was like, what happened to this thing? And there's like a patch where it was, and it doesn't look like there's really anything there now. Whether it just fell in on itself and it's just showing up as like this weird patch or like whatever, but like,
Who salted the earth?
yeah, like it looks sort of like it imploded. And so I'm at a loss as to what happened to it. But it's up behind the house that my grandparents built,
Mhm.
and my grandfather was using that field, so it wouldn't surprise me if my grandfather had found the irrigation hookup and had been using it to water his garden, because
Mhm.
that would make sense. um but the cistern was filling from an aquifer somewhere, so it was just murky white because of sediment and whatever was leaching into the soil, because it was a lot of gravel and limestone and
Mhm. Well,
all
probably lime
granite.
then.
Yeah, it was granite. It was a big giant granite slab running through there.
Mhm. Wow.
So yeah, I mean, the place was very much fodder for horror stories in retrospect. And I'm shocked that we survived to adulthood.
Same.
Yeah, so um yeah, I think on the next episode I'll talk about the ghost I saw in the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We'll just keep this going.
Okay. So do you want to stop this episode for now and we'll do another
I think
one?
it's a good place to stop. We'll talk about the hotel ghost and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So be sure to like us and hit the thumbs up on the video.
And leave a comment. Tell us about scary stuff that you've seen, heard, witnessed, experienced,
Oh yeah, tell
read
us
about.
your ghost story,
Tell us your ghost story.
or even a UFO story. I mean, paranormal is paranormal. I'm not
Yeah.
picky.
If you got a Bigfoot story, we want to hear it.
That would be awesome.
Like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you later.
Woo!